Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this emergency meeting of Derbyshire Dales District Council, and a warm welcome to those members of the public that are looking in on YouTube. We're going to start with a request from Councillor Claire Raw, which I'm in agreement with, and that is that the committee holds a minute's silence in respect to the death of George Floyd in America. Thank you. Before we start the meeting proper, for the benefit of especially those viewers listening on YouTube, members, I'll introduce myself first, and it's by way of introducing yourself and also to make sure we've got each and every one of you can hear. So I'm Gary Purdy, I'm councillor for Masson Ward, I'm leader of the council, and I'll go in alphabetical order. So Councillor Bull, please.
Councillor Bull. They're all muted, Gary.
You should hear me. Councillor Bull, can you introduce yourself, please?
It won't come off mute. Yeah, sorry. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Sue Bull. I'm the member for Ashbourne North.
Thank you. Councillor Cruz, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Cruz. I'm the District Councillor for St Giles and Tansley.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, please.
Yes, I'm Graham Elliott, and I'm the councillor for the Lathgill and Bradford ward.
Thank you. Councillor Finesse, please.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm Councillor Chris Finesse, member for Bradwell in the north of the area.
Thank you. Councillor Gamble, please. Councillor Gamble.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I think I possibly hadn't unmuted properly, sorry. Claire Gamble, I'm the councillor for Lytton and Longston.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson, please.
I'm Councillor Sue Hobson, ward member for Chatsworth and deputy leader of the council.
Thank you. Finally, Councillor Raw, please.
Good evening, Claire Raw for Hathersage, Eyam and Grindleford. Thank you.
Thank you. So we start the agenda proper, and that number one on the item is apologies. I can see everybody is present, so with no apologies, Jackie. Thank you. Public participation. Thank you for the questions that have come in. With the able assistance of Jim Fern, the questions will come up on screen and I will read the responses. So thank you to Kate Gard, Cook, and the response, Kate, is the District Council is following the guidance laid out by the government. This sets out the national priorities for the discretionary grant fund to be small and micro businesses, businesses with relatively high ongoing fixed property related costs in properties of a certain size, businesses which can demonstrate that they have suffered a significant fall in income due to the COVID-19 crisis, The aim of this fund is immediate business survival. Along with partners in Derbyshire, the District Council will in due course be planning for recovery, and in doing so we will at that time need to balance economic, social and environmental priorities. However, the grants we are concerned with today are to secure the short-term survival of existing businesses and jobs in the face of the immediate COVID-19 crisis. The District Council does not consider it appropriate to place additional requirements upon business applicants at this unprecedented time. That concludes that response to that question. The next question, please, Jim. So with thanks to Dave Smith and the same question from Councillor Claire Gamble, the response is as follows. A report on this matter is to be considered by the Emergency Committee on 11th of June 2020. At the last meeting, it was stated, just bear with me, turn the page over too much. I'll start again. Answer, a report on this matter is to be considered by the Emergency Committee on 11th of June 2020. At the last meeting, it was stated that a more rigorous parking attendant profile would be present in hotspots. Can you confirm that took place? So the answer is, at the last meeting, it was stated there was to be an increased police presence at the expected hotspots and that civil enforcement officers would also be patrolling. Those hotspots, most notably Matlock, Bath and Bakewell, saw a higher than usual police presence and a level of civil parking enforcement equivalent to that which we would normally deploy on a busy bank holiday weekend. I'm pleased to report that parking remained fairly uneventful despite the high turnout of visitors, although there were areas of particular concern reported in adjoining districts, with serious parking and traffic congestion at Ladybar Reservoir and Harper Hill in the High Peak, and Dovedale and Ilham in neighbouring Staffordshire Moorlands. Since the bank holiday weekend, NSL have continued to provide us with their full contractual level of civil parking enforcement in our car parks, with a further commitment to enforce on-street hotspots at the direction of the authority. The next question, please, Jim. So again, thank you, Dave Smith and Councillor Claire Gamble. And the answer is, from the start of the lockdown, the District Council has used all its communications channels to urge visitors not to visit the Derbyshire Dales until local services are able to welcome them properly. Our social media messages have to date reached almost 2 million people. In the early weeks of the lockdown, our campaign message was very strong. Don't even go there. This message alone reached 250,000 people via social media on the first weekend of the lockdown. The government's subsequent announcement of unlimited travel for day trippers has undoubtedly put pressure on areas such as ours, and the national profile enjoyed by the government's message to open the door to previously locked down households is almost impossible to counter. Even a stay away message from the Peak National Park Authority Chief Executive to a BBC Breakfast TV audience of 5 million people seemed to have no impact. Since the government's announcement, our own messaging has softened to one of respect and protect our communities, appealing to visitors to avoid hotspots, and into last weekend, all agencies and councils in Derbyshire, including the Chief Constable and all local NHS trusts, signed a joint statement urging visitors to stay away until later in the year. Despite the widespread coordinated release of that statement, visitors came into the Derbyshire Dales regardless. As leader, I have strongly conveyed the views of the District Council to government through our MP, the Forum of the Local Government Association and the District Council's network, and government is aware of the issues unlimited travel is having on areas such as the Derbyshire Dales. The police have also clearly expressed the limit of their powers, which really extend to no more than issuing dispersal orders to tackle any groups of more than 6 people and issuing advice on social distancing. Other than this, the police have no legal powers to do anything about breaches of social distancing. Thank you, Jim. And the next question, please.
All the remaining questions are duplications, Councillor Purdy.
I'm just looking at that, Jim. I note that. So I got lost with the answer on that one. So that's question there. 2, 3. I've probably skipped a question, have I? If I have, I apologise for that. We'll put that out later. Move on. Sorry about that. So, has any member got any interest to declare? No. Okay. Can we move then to item 4 on the agenda? And that is the COVID-19 Business Support Grants, Derbyshire Dales Discretionary Grant Fund. I'd like to hand over to Steve Capes to take us forward on this, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. This is a report about a discretionary grant fund for businesses in the light of COVID-19, and this is indeed an unprecedented period for businesses. The survey recently done this week by D2N2 shows that 97% of businesses in this area have been affected in areas such as sales, bookings and cash flow. But the District Council has been helping since the lockdown period in particular started. We've paid out over £29 million worth in government small business grant funding and retail and hospitality and leisure grant funding. And that's helped more than 2,500 businesses. We as a council have allocated rate reliefs, and we have also been giving lots of advice via our website and direct to businesses as well, via our economic development team and via our revenues and finance teams as well. But we do recognise that's not enough, and to their credit, the government does too. And that's why the government has set up this so-called discretionary grant fund. We're bringing that to you tonight, councillors, because it is a new policy and it's a new emergency policy to deal with the current situation. The purpose of it is to top up the existing small business grant fund and retail and hospitality and leisure grant funds. But it's important to note that both those funds were designed by the government specifically to be aimed at businesses with high ongoing fixed property related costs, and the current fund is as well. There's a lot of detail on what the discretionary grant fund criteria by the government are in the background paper, which is mentioned at the bottom of the report, the government guidance. It's 15 pages worth, so I haven't appended it, but it is available on the gov.uk website. It's important, I think, that members should note that this is not in any stretch of the imagination a recovery fund. It is still an emergency fund. We are still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and this is a fund to help businesses survive. It's really to give them a bit of breathing space to help them survive a bit longer. One other thing that we need to be clear about as a council is that the amount that we've been allocated by the government, which is just over £1.7 million, is significant, but we do not expect it will be anything like enough. By comparison, as I've just said, we've allocated something approaching £30 million to 2,500 businesses. We know there's well over 4,000 businesses in the Derbyshire Dales, and yet for that other 1,000 plus, we've been given 1/20th of the amount. So our expectation is that it will not meet demand. However, it is a good thing. The fact that we have some additional funding to allocate is very much a positive. It will help hundreds more Derbyshire Dales businesses, and that's got to be a good thing. But I must emphasise this is not a recovery fund. It's not to help them recover for the plan for the future. It is simply a survival fund to help businesses keep their heads above water in these very difficult times. As officers across the council and with other councils across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, we've worked hard on making the allocation process and the criteria as fair as possible, and for it to work as smoothly as possible for businesses. And I'm going to ask Giles Dan, Economic Development Manager, to say a little bit more about those criteria and the application process and the rationale behind it, if I might, Chair.
That's fine, thank you. If you'd like to come in, please, Giles. Giles?
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to and reiterate what Steve has just said, the fund is very much about businesses with fixed property costs, ongoing fixed property costs, and obviously those that have been affected by COVID and in terms of their business being disrupted and in many cases unable to trade. The guidance that we've set out and prepared, as Steve said, is attached to the committee report. In section 7 of the report, we've set out the core eligibility criteria for the scheme, which are within the parameters set out by government, and we've tried to make those clear in terms of which businesses would be eligible, but also in the guidance where the exclusions would apply. In terms of the priorities that have been set, as Steve said, there are some national priorities, but also some areas of local discretion, which we as officers have proposed for consideration by members tonight. In terms of the national priorities, these include small and micro businesses without their own rates assessment for the premises who operate within shared workspaces. Regular market traders, so these are market traders that are based in the Derbyshire Dales and have fixed premises costs. Bed and breakfast accommodation, which includes businesses that are registered as food businesses with the District Council's environmental health team, and some charity properties. So this will be charities that are local to the Derbyshire Dales. What we've proposed as officers within the Dales is to add some local discretion to the criteria to try and bring in some other businesses that have missed out under the existing schemes. So these would be small and micro businesses beyond the retail and hospitality and leisure sectors, which members will be aware have already been prioritised through the significant funding that's been made available, who operate in premises just above the small business rate threshold. So we're saying up to 20,000 rateable value or annual rent. So it's that next tier of businesses that have just missed out from the current government schemes. We're also proposing to bring in some self-catering accommodation premises. So what we're saying is those that are registered as furnished holiday lets, paying council tax, where this is the owner's sole or primary source of income. We recognise that is a gap in the scheme, and therefore we've tried to address that within the criteria that we're presenting to you tonight. In terms of the process for considering applications, as Steve said, the sum that we have available to us is relatively small, so we do need to prioritise. So we've set out within the guidance note some specific scoring assessment, which tries to again reflect the government guidance. So this looks specifically at the 4 areas that the government has identified, and I'll just quickly go through those. Number of employees within the applicant business, the level of ongoing fixed premises costs, the trading status of the business, so has it been able to trade partially or at all, and the scale of impact in terms of COVID-19 losses. We then will look at the applications that come in on that basis and score them based on the assessment criteria that we've set out. And in terms of grant awards, we have developed a range of potential grant awards, which are very much in line with other Derbyshire authorities, and again, in line with the government's guidance. The government has basically stipulated that grants can either be 10,000, 25,000, or at the local authority's discretion under 10,000. So the levels of grant that we propose in this scheme are 2,500, 5,000, 7,500, 10 and 25. And only businesses who score in the highest bands, basically, so those that in exceptional circumstances would receive a grant of 25,000. We expect the majority of awards to be £10,000 or less, and again, that is within the guidance that government has sent out. The other point I just wanted to make before taking questions was that we have tried to proactively target certain sections of the economy where we obviously know there's been a particular impact. So in the guidance, members will see that we've specifically targeted visitor accommodation businesses with around about £500,000 worth of the allocation that is available to us, with the remainder going towards the national priorities and those other areas of discretion that I've set out earlier. I'd also like to propose a slight amendment to the guidance if members would go to section 16 of the guidance, please. And this is really for simplification purposes. So you'll see in section 16, which follows the table above, it starts off following a review of take-up. I would like to propose the following change. So following a review of take-up after the first call deadline from businesses prioritised in section 13, the District Council may, at its discretion, consider applications received from eligible businesses not in the priority categories occupying property with a rateable value or annual rent of less than 20,000, ineligible for support from other central government COVID-related grants should sufficient funding remain available. So that would replace the rest of paragraph 16 as it is in your papers. In our view, that simplifies things, hopefully within the guidance. And with that, Councillor Purdy, I'm happy to take questions along with Steve.
Thank you very much, Giles. I've got a number of hands up. So first, please, Councillor Furness.
Before I ask my question, there's just one point on section 16. You said an annual rent of less than 20,000. In here it says 15,000. So is that changed to 20,000?
Yes, it is, Councillor Furness, and that's to make it match up with the earlier paragraph 13, which talks about the next tier of businesses coming in between 15 and 19,999. So it's just trying to make that standard. So what we're saying is that other businesses under a rateable value of 20,000 will be eligible, but we would obviously look at the priority categories first within the call that we're putting out, proposing to put out next week.
Okay, thanks for that. My other question is on the Small Business Grant Fund. It looks as though we've got about £5 million still left on that. How confident are you of being able to place that? Is there a deadline after which it must be returned? And is it possible that we could use some of that, transfer some of that to the discretionary fund?
Chairman, I can answer that for Councillor Furness. The government allocated that originally we were allocated in the region of 36 million. The government allocated that on a fairly crude basis, and it has been for all authorities monitoring that over the last 8 weeks or so to see whether it was enough or too much. For our case, it is too much. In terms of the businesses that are eligible, we have contacted, as well as those 2,500 that have been paid, we've contacted, Giles and his team have personally contacted another 734 businesses that could potentially be eligible for the fund. Out of that, that's only generated a small proportion, probably less than 100 of new applications to the fund. So despite trying our hardest by contacting personally, not just through press releases, but actually ringing them up, we don't think we're going to get that many more applications to that fund. So what that means is we think that we will have spent approximately 30 million out of that 36 million for the Small Business Grant Fund and for the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant Fund. They're from the same pot. We have asked the government on a number of occasions, can we please use the rest of that for the discretionary fund? And the answer has been consistently no. That's regrettable, of course, because that means rather than having 1.7 million, we could have had 6 million for the discretionary grant fund, which would have made a fantastic difference. But the government has been absolutely clear and fixed, and to give them credit, they haven't wavered or changed their mind at all on this. They've said absolutely not. The reason they've given is that for some councils, they have overspent on their small business grant funding, and therefore they want to take it in and reallocate it across the country. But nevertheless, it puts us in a bad position. They overestimated the first one, but it means they've underestimated the last one. We have more small businesses that wouldn't have been eligible for those initial grants, but they haven't taken that into account when allocating our discretionary grant fund. As I say, Councillor Furness, we have mentioned this to the government. I've been on calls pretty much every Friday for the last 10 weeks with BEIS officials, made this point, and they don't seem to be taking heed of it.
Just a question, Steve, on the deadline. Is there a deadline by which you have to send it back if we haven't used it?
Councillor Furness, at the moment, no, there isn't a deadline, but government are monitoring it on a weekly basis, and we anticipate they will make that call at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cruz next, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think just firstly wanted to thank the officers for the detailed reports. There's a couple of questions I've got, but a couple of comments before I ask the question. I think the teamwork that's been put in is fantastic, given that you've got a application process that's going to go live from Monday. I know that will have taken a lot of effort, so that's really good. The extra funding for the small micro businesses is appreciated. I think everybody on this call would want more. And I'm just wondering, I'm just reflecting on whether there is an overspend on this small business grant and small hospitality and retail grant across the patch. And if there is an overspend, then I understand why central government may not want to yield more funds back to us. But if there's an underspend across the patch, maybe we ought to be lobbying central government through yourself, Councillor Purdy. Maybe we link back in with our MP, Sarah Dines, because I think this grant that we're looking at today is very tailored to our small businesses. I don't know if that's something that we can look at as a cross-party activity.
I've already emailed Rishi Sunak, Chief Chancellor of the Exchequer, this morning, Councillor Cruz, and asked the questions surrounding this grant. So I'm waiting for an answer back.
Fantastic.
You've got some questions for the officers?
Yes. Yeah, my question is, how many businesses do you think will benefit from this incremental 1.7 million? And the second question is, what efforts will be made to publicise and support the small businesses' engagement in this, particularly maybe those people who aren't so savvy with the internet and social media?
Steve?
Councillor Purdy, I can start off on that, perhaps particularly with the second part of it. We will be certainly, yes, using social media as you'd expect. We'll also be putting it out on our website. We've got, Giles will know the number, but we've got many hundreds of businesses actually signed up to an e-newsletter that we as a council put out to businesses. And every inquiry we've had over the last 10 weeks, we've been saying, sign up, because come tomorrow, we'll be sending out information on this, so you can do so. Jim has written a press release, depending on members' decision tonight, is poised to press the button to get that sent out to the press first thing tomorrow. So that will hopefully get picked up by the mainstream media, so it will be publicised throughout as well. But members, if you, not just the 8 members here, but all members, wished to publicise it with your parish councils and in your patches as well, that would be really very much appreciated. We do want to make sure it gets, the grease hits the squeak sort of thing. So any help that you can give will be much appreciated. With regard to the numbers that we think apply, I can honestly say we don't know, Councillor Cruz. It could be anything from a few hundred to a few thousand. I suspect it will be more rather than less, although having said that, the intelligence we've had from another district in Derbyshire, which launched slightly earlier this week, was that they had far fewer than expected. However, that's not a district with the same number of small businesses and have the same number of issues that we've had. So I don't think we can use that as a comparison.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gamble next, then Councillor Hobson, and Councillor Raw, and Councillor Elliott, and Councillor Bull. So Councillor Gamble, please.
Oh, hi, thank you. Actually, Councillor Cruz covered quite a lot of the questions I wanted to ask. So very good, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring up the whole thing is whether Councillor Purdy was going to make some sort of messaging to government on the ground. I know yesterday, I definitely picked up at all that yesterday there was a Tory MP that at PMQ brought this very issue up. He didn't seem so unequivocal then about it. So I just wonder if that could be followed up in light of that, and what with if the more MPs, Tory MPs, are keen for their constituencies, because we, as Steve says, we have an unusual constituency full of small businesses that are going to struggle, and this is a minuscule amount of money. So I suppose what the other thing I'd just like to really support this thing is that I hope the message you get that this is not going to be some lifeline for a lot of businesses. This is very small.
Yeah. Councillor Gamble, have you got a question for the officers, please?
Oh, right. That was going to be my question, really. Is there going to be some sort of movement towards trying to get this just a shortfall from the other grants and move that into the discretionary? And will you be pushing for central government to actually acknowledge that the knowledge base in local government is actually, they know their own businesses, and actually start to trust local government to actually make the decisions to allocate resources to the local businesses in the way that they need, and that every constituency will have unique needs, and we will be allowed for local government to actually use that discretion, the expertise they have to do that.
Well, I assure you I've been on to Rishi Sunak and obviously working closely with Sarah Dines. Councillor Hobson, please.
Chair, I'm happy to move the motion. This discretionary funding will be targeted at small and micro businesses in our area that have fallen between the gaps in the existing scheme. I think it is worth noting again, although it has already been said, that this district council has already been able to entirely remove business rates for 2021 for a range of businesses in our area, and that more than 2,500 businesses eligible for COVID-19 grants have been paid over £29 million to date. And I have to thank Steve, Giles, Karen, all the people in the team for that hard work with that. All their other previous hard work undertaken at this challenging time, Steve's already mentioned, and it is detailed in the report. Of course, we wish that there was more funding available, but we have what we have. And I would urge all businesses who think that they may qualify to apply as soon as the system's available between the 8th and the 22nd of June. These businesses, these small and micro businesses, are the backbone of the Derbyshire Dales, and we wish them luck for the future.
Thank you. It's been moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bull, I'll take your second. Thank you. Councillor Raw, you're next, please.
Thank you. I just wanted a bit of clarity on the grants available for charities. There's two charities that are very much Derbyshire Dales based, but do support other localities within Derbyshire that can specifically think of, that I just wanted to ask the officers about them. One is Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which is, is very much interested in the Dales and particularly the Peak Park and wildlife conservation. And while it's based in Bakewell, it does cover the whole of Derbyshire. And the other one is Helen's Trust, which, as you probably appreciate, provides absolutely outstanding support to people at the end of life and has been very hard hit, I think, during coronavirus, but it doesn't just provide support to people in the Derbyshire Dales. I just wanted to run by with officers that where we could look at charities where they were predominantly supporting the Derbyshire Dales, but also perhaps providing some support elsewhere, that their applications would be considered if appropriate.
Steve, can you answer that? I think a question really, whilst some charities have been mentioned, I think that's a broader church and
yeah,
it all charity.
Yeah.
All I'd say, Chairman, is that without talking about individual cases, we'll be happy to look at them in more detail and perhaps get back to you after the meeting, Councillor Raw.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, I'm prepared to second this, but my question, I noticed we were saying we're actually going on and setting up to do the applications, and there is this deadline of the 22nd of June. If we get to that stage and some of them haven't already got in touch and applied for this, does that mean that they won't get a chance to do that? And secondly, when the other the small business grants went out and the leisure and hospitality ones, they were like already preempted that this was coming along. And I know Steve said about we've got a newsletter which is going out to quite a few of the small businesses, but are they the people that really the ones that we need to be targeting, and how do we get to them to give them that pre-knowledge that this is there to be had? Because I must say, it is difficult to find some of these things, and it can be confusing at times. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, those are both very good questions. The application window is relatively short. It is the initial application window, I should term it, is relatively short. It's only 2 weeks, and on the close of that, then we will assess the applications that have come in that period and spend time assessing them and then paying them out. At that point, we will know whether there's any funding left or not. If there is funding left at that point, then we would hope to be in a position to open a future window, and it might be that that's when the clause 16 that Giles was talking about earlier would then kick in. But that's our mechanism of ensuring that at least those that apply in that first window can be judged fairly against each other. It's not to say there may not be another chance afterwards. There might be, but I would certainly urge all interested businesses to get in the first window if at all possible. And in terms of publicity, well, we're putting this publicity out tomorrow. Obviously, a lot of businesses know already, and the fund opens on Monday, so they do have a bit of advance warning in that respect. Having said that, I think the business community are more than tuned into this as a whole. It's been published by the government nationally and by other bodies regionally as well. But as I said earlier, any help that members can give to publicise this within your wards would be gratefully received. We do want to make sure we get applications from anyone who thinks they might be eligible.
Thank you, Steve. Anything further, Councillor Ball?
No, thank you, Chair.
In that case, Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you, Chair. One for Steve, really. I don't know if it's of little consequence now, but are you able to briefly explain how the government arrived at the 1.7 million for Derbyshire Dales?
Well, it's possibly one for Karen, but I'll give my brief explanation. And basically, it was 5% of the allocation that they thought we would have spent. That we will have spent at the end of it. So it's 5% of something like 30 million. Karen will know the exact figures, but for all authorities, they made their allocation 5% of what they anticipated spend on the small business fund and the retail and hospitality fund was. Karen might have some more accurate figures than that, but basically every council in the country was given 5%.
That's
next. Do you want to come in, Karen?
Yes, Steve's right. It was based on 5% of their forecast, which was 5% of about £34 million. We haven't actually spent that much, but that was the figure they used.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Karen.
much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Finesse, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Finesse, you want to come back?
No, it was okay, Chair. I was just going to second it, but Councillor Bull's done that.
Okay. Any more questions of officers before we go to the vote? No, in that case then, Jackie, can you call out members and ask them to give a yay or nay on screen, please?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Ball,
For,
Bruce,
4,
Elliott,
4,
Finesse,
Or
Gamble,
Oh,
Hobson,
4,
Purdy,
4.
Rourke.
4,
Unanimous.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you, members. Before I move on, thanks for the nod, Sandra. Can we approve the minutes of the previous meeting? All in favour? Thank you.
Yep.
So we move on to the next item on the agenda, please, and that is the Green Waste Service update. That's to provide an update on the District Council's Green Waste Collection Service. So can I hand over to you, please, Ash?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I don't intend to say very much about this report. It is quite brief, and it's obviously a report in retrospect because a decision had to be made to ensure that the garden waste service could be reinstated from Monday the 1st. Due to changes in the working practices at Serco, it was no longer possible to provide a council employee who was qualified as a HGV driver. So we've had to appoint an agency driver to support the garden waste service. I don't think there's much else to say on this, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, please, members. Any questions for us? I can't see the whole of you. I'll have to move across screen. I'm also dependent on Sandra. I've got one hand up from Councillor Bull.
thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's not quite on the green waste, but I have had a few, considering we've opened this, the food caddy bags. Are they, because they used to go out with the garden waste collections and the likes? If that isn't the case, is there a possibility I, as a member, am prepared to collectively have some here and they could contact me from my ward and I will, you know, distribute them that way round if that is, if that's helpful to anybody?
If I may, Chair, I tried to cover this point in last week. The food caddy bags haven't arrived with us yet due to the situation. We have offered information that's on the website that gives an alternative option for residents if they wish to use that. But I'll ask Sally to come in on this point in case there's anything else that she'd like to add.
Over to you, please, Sally. Hey there, Sally.
Yeah, sorry, it went unmute.
Okay. Councillor Hobson, I've got you.
I haven't got anything to add to what Ash said other than obviously Serco are incredibly busy and have extra stuff in at the moment. And normally when we do the free sack distribution, they require extra staff. So possible for them to deliver even if sacks had arrived.
Did everybody get that? My sound was a bit muted. Sally, would you mind repeating that, please? Because it got quite an echo on your delivery.
Yeah. When Serco normally deliver the liners and sacks, they normally have to have extra staff in to make sure that those get delivered. So obviously at the moment they're already having staff and to keep the service running, it wouldn't be possible for them to deliver them at the moment anyway, even if the food waste bags had arrived. And like Ash says, we have extra advice online for people.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got that. So I've got Councillor Finesse next, then Cruz, then Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I live in a black bag area, so that the garden waste here is in bags. And I see the limit is going to be 5 bags on this, where the collection, now the collection's starting again. Some of the houses around here have got as many as 20 bags already sitting outside the houses, waiting for collection. They've been accumulating over the weeks. Is it the situation that we're only going to take 5 of those and going to leave the other 15 on the road? I just want to warn people if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Councillor Finesse, because this is the very situation that we're finding ourselves in, and that's why we've had to ask for extra resources from members, because there is a backlog, and clearly that illustrates the point that we're trying to make. We aren't taking any side waste, and the reason for that is if we start taking side waste, if you consider Councillor Finesse's neighbours, for example, you take 20 sacks, that reduces the ability to complete the round and give everybody an equal share of collection. So we do have additional resources, and that's exactly the backlog that we're talking about. Under normal circumstances, many households won't be presenting a full bin. At the moment, they are presenting full bins in the main, and a lot of people also have additional waste that needs collecting.
I think it's a good rule, and I just hope the operatives stick to it, you know, and don't take all the bags from one house and then only 5 from another. As long as they sort of stick to the rules themselves, I think we shall be fine, you know, and people will understand it.
Okay, hopefully we'll get to the public's patience on this. Councillor Cruz, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is linked to my question from last time, really, which is around Serco as our partners. So we approved nearly 17k at the last meeting. This is another 5k on top, so that's 22-ish k overall. Can the officers give me some assurance that we're getting a good deal out of Serco and that we're sharing the pain in this particular situation?
Yes, I can, Chair. It is extra money from the authority to support the garden waste service in the short term, but members should be assured that Serco have also brought in additional resources that not only match the amount that the council's putting in, but actually there's more than that.
Thank you, Ash. Councillor Hobson, please.
Sorry, Councillor Purdy, can I just
come back?
Yeah, please.
Come back.
Yep. Thank you very much. It was just to say, Ash, do you envisage there being further incremental costs, or do you think the situation is now in control and that will be sustained, or is there likely to be more coming our way? Just as a question, what's your thoughts on that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Cruz. No, we don't envisage any more. The calculation of the costs and the time period of 6 weeks is obviously an estimate. It is, however, put together when you look at the tonnage capacity of the vehicles, the travel time, especially considering the vehicles are likely to be full, and the expected garden waste out in the district that needs collecting. So, yes, it is an estimate, but it is a calculated estimate. We do hope that the backlog will be cleared within the 6 weeks, but as I've said in the previous report, we also have to accept that it may take longer. Sally and her team are in regular contact with Serco, and we're getting formal updates on a weekly basis to assess that. Serco, I suppose this is an important point for members who I haven't been speaking to over the last couple of days, that this point has been raised, and Serco have asked us for additional funds for unrelated issues, and we have said no. We don't bring every request from other partners, whether it's Serco or other partners that we have, to members. We only bring requests for finances where officers feel that it has an element of reasonability to it. We've rejected a number of requests from partners over the last couple of weeks. So I can't say no for sure, but in the current circumstances, with regards to this point, I don't expect to do that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ash.
Thank you, Ash. Before I come to you, Councillor Hobson, I think it would be helpful for our public if I could ask Karen a question. on how the government are asking us what it's costing this authority, and indeed all authorities in the country, what the process is for calculating all these extra costs and losses. If you could just give a brief to the help of the viewers, please.
Yeah, certainly. The government has set up a process where each council has to submit a monitoring return where we identify all the areas of additional expense and all the areas where we've got shortfalls on income. And the government, we've had 2 rounds so far. We send them to the government and they consider those. After the first round, the government did allocate another £1.6 billion of funding across local authorities. And the funding that we got from that round was over £700,000. So that was very helpful. We've recently submitted another set of figures and we're waiting to hear the outcome from those.
Thank you very much, Karen. Councillor Hobson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Firstly, for Ash or Sally, we're on day 4 now of the green waste. Generally, how is it going? That's my first question. And my second question, I'm echoing Councillor Bull. Some of my residents have not had their green waste, the garden waste bags delivered this year, and they've obviously been advised to buy their own in this instance. But I've already emailed Ash and Sally to say that I, for one, would be more than happy to deliver any bags, you know, and I'm sure members of Fit and Well would be able to assist if they could. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got no more questions. Would somebody like to move the recommendations, please? I can't see the whole screen, so bear with me.
We've got Councillor Gamble waiting, Councillor Purdy, for the question.
Sorry, I missed you, Councillor Gamble. Go ahead, please.
All right. So just a quick question, really. Just Ash, what was the first date that Serco actually asked for this new driver?
It wasn't a case of asking for a new driver, Chair. It was a case of, through discussions with Sally and the contract manager, we were aware that Serco had changed working practices, and that gave us a decision to make, and that was last week.
What day last week?
I would have to check my diary, unless Sally can remember off the top of her head. It would have been the beginning of the week, I think. Sorry, I can't be clearer without looking through my emails, Councillor Gamble. I'm happy to share that with you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And just one other, and one of the questions that I didn't actually get a response to that I put in, I did ask how much of the 700,000 odd that we'd had, how much has been allocated to date?
Allocated to what?
Any sort of COVID-19 spending?
As I said to you in my email, I probably have to refer you to Karen on that.
Yeah, obviously now Karen's here, so yes.
Karen, can you answer that?
Yes, I can. The £700,000 that we've received so far won't be sufficient to cover all of our forecast extra expenses and lost income. The returns that I've submitted so far showed for waste collection the extra £17,000 that members approved last week. The fact is that we've got a lot more lost income than this grant will cover, and that's why we're hoping that we'll be more successful in our next round of funding.
Thank you, Karen. I've got Councillor Hobson next, please.
Sorry, Chair. I was expecting a reply about how things had gone this last week from Ash or Sally with the green waste.
Okay, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, I think probably Sally's best to give a more recent update. I spoke with Serco on Tuesday afternoon, and they were really pleased with how they were progressing with the rounds. Obviously, there's a lot of garden waste to collect, but they were really satisfied with the progress so far. I'm sure Sally will be able to give you a more up-to-date position.
Yes, every day has gone really well. They've completed all the rounds on every day with no unfortunate events or anything. They have reported that most households are not putting outside waste as we've asked, and and that whilst there are a few bins that are a bit too heavy to empty, the majority are okay to empty, and people have taken it on board to take a little bit out just in case. So everything's going really well.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Sally. I've got Councillor Furness next and then Councillor Bull.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Does that find a seconder?
I don't mind seconding that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we take the vote then, please, Jackie?
Yes, Councillor Bull.
4.
Cruz.
4.
Elliott.
4.
Furness.
4.
Gamble. Councillor Gamble.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't unmuted. Abstain.
Hobson. 4. Purdy.
4.
Raw.
Abstain.
That's 6 for, 2 abstentions.
So the motion's carried. Thank you. Before we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the operational update from the Chief Executive, I would like to add my thanks to the officers. I know that you're working incredibly hard, days and nights and weekends, and that's no exaggeration. So put on record our thanks to you all for extremely good work in difficult circumstances. So I'd like to call in the Chief Executive, Mr. Paul Wilson now, please, to provide an operational update.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, members. Well, the corporate leadership team are currently working on a wide range of issues in addition to those presented to you this evening. These include matters which are due to be considered by the Emergency Committee next Thursday, the 11th of June, which are the reopening of public conveniences across the district, the reopening of Bakewell Stall Market, and the reopening of the High Street Safely initiatives, which we are working in partnership with Derbyshire County Council. In addition, we are progressing our organisational recovery plan, which will include the phased return of our services as far as current restrictions and staffing resources allow. However, it goes without saying that this is still an extremely challenging situation in which we are dealing with. We are working effectively across the organisation, but we are certainly not back to normal as of yet, and it may be some time before we reach that particular position. Resources remain extremely limited, particularly in our clean and green team, and we are therefore having to prioritise service delivery, and we are not able to meet all service requests which we are receiving. However, we are trying our best to meet those priority service requests in accordance with resource availability. Clearly, the rest of the organisation is functioning well across its services, such as planning, regulatory services, environmental health and finance and the like, and there are no other significant issues on the horizon which members need to be aware of at this present time. However, I'm very happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Questions from members? I've got Councillor Raw.
Thank you. I've got several matters I want to raise. These have come to light through the Bakewell page on Facebook, the Bakewell area page, and concerns that have been raised by residents. There's been lots of concerns raised about the rubbish and the mess that's been left by visitors across the Bakewell area and surrounding areas. I'm particularly concerned and would like some sort of clarity, re the decision about funding the eviction of travellers off the Bakewell showground, and what was the operational decision in regard to that, and why wasn't that decision taken to members, and what's been put in place to provide accommodation or a safe place for travellers to be in our community with regards to our legal obligation, and how much progress have we made on finding a permanent travellers site for this community. It's a real concern that at this time when this is a particularly vulnerable group of people, that while it's far from ideal for them to be on Bakewell showground, it's private property. I just don't understand why, as a district council, without member discussion, we got involved. So I'd like some clarity on that. Again, I'd like to raise the issue of public toilets. I understand it's on the agenda for next week. We're 3 weeks into this. I'm still getting reports of human waste being left in parks, being left on the side of the road. It's just, you know, and you only have to go on village Facebook groups to find out about this. So where are those risk assessments? Next week is a long time away. We're 3 weeks past the bank holiday period, and we've still no firm decisions on opening our public toilets. 3 weeks since Prime Minister Johnson announced easing of lockdown. I don't think it's satisfactory. We've got a situation since Prime Minister Johnson announced that people could barbecue. It's sowed a seed in many people's heads to barbecue across our Peak District, and it's resulted in habitats being destroyed by ground nesting birds. Nine Ladies, our ancient site, has been destroyed and scorched. I am aware that there's a petition that's gaining momentum. I'd like to ask members to join me in signing that petition and to write to the major supermarkets within our area and ask them not to sell disposable barbecues, so that we can avoid further incidents and further fires in our peak and moorlands. I think this is a real big issue, and I think we need to be supporting our fire service in this. So they're my three things. I want to know what's happening with regards to travellers, where the risk assessments are on public toilets, and I want support to ban the use of barbecues in Derbyshire Dales. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, clearly, it's wholly unacceptable, the amount of litter that was left across the Derbyshire Dales last weekend. And unfortunately, it wasn't just the Derbyshire Dales which experienced this problem, but there's been reports across the whole of the country. Totally unacceptable. Our Clean and Green team spent pretty much all day on Monday removing 150 bags of waste from our main parks and town centre areas. And on the back of that, the District Council will be undertaking some further PR this weekend. I will be giving an interview on Radio Derby tomorrow to try and push that message that if people are going to come to visit the Derbyshire Dales, please respect our area, please respect our communities, and take your litter home with you. So we will be pushing that message very strongly again this weekend alongside our partners. In terms of the traveller situation and the showground, clearly the District Council has a very strong operational interest in the showground, despite the fact that we don't own all of the land. It very much is a partnership situation there that we run with the Bakewell Agricultural and Horticultural Society. Clearly, the traveller situation, whilst we put significant measures in place to try and prevent incursions into that site, it's a very difficult site to lock down completely. So when the travellers did actually incur into the site on land which the District Council didn't control or own, we felt that there was an obligation on our part to try and assist the Horticultural Society with that. It's not an issue which came before members because it was an operational decision, and the costs of eviction proceedings are met from existing council budgets. So there's no further request for funding in order to progress that particular matter. In terms of the public toilets, Councillor Rowe is right, that matter is coming before the Council Emergency Committee next week, and members will be able to make a decision based upon the risk assessment work which has been completed. We are not alone in not opening all of our public toilets. Derbyshire County Council haven't opened theirs either, but clearly we are moving to a situation where more of the high street is now opening up, and gradually we will be looking to make more of our facilities available to visitors and residents. And on the final point of the barbecues, the District Council has already lended itself its name to that particular support and campaign to seek retailers not selling disposable barbecues in our area. That's something which we did earlier this week. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Gamble, please.
Really, very much in support of what Councillor Raw said, particularly about the barbecue issue. Have the district council actually written to the shop district asking them not to sell barbecues and explaining clearly why? Because the scenes we've heard about at the weekends, you know, ground nesting birds have got young birds at the minute, young fledglings at the minute. So have you done that?
We've not done that as an individual organisation, but the National Park launched a PR campaign earlier this week. They wrote to us and sought our cooperation and asked whether we would put our name to it, and we've agreed to do that. So it is very much a combined effort across the whole of the Peak District alongside some of our other partners. It's not something we've pursued in isolation, but we certainly support it and we've pushed that message out.
So will you be writing to the individual shops and asking them not to sell them?
I think I've just answered that question. It's a partnership approach, which we put our name to.
You haven't done what you're doing.
Yeah, we've agreed to put our name to a campaign which is being run by many organisations across the Peak District.
All right, okay, sorry. That campaign you've put your name to then, will that campaign be writing to individual shops and asking them not to sell disposable barbecues?
That is not something we've done today. If members wish that decision to be taken, that's something that we would have to then consider.
Could we have that put on the agenda for next week then?
If that is a policy decision that the council wishes to take, that may be something that we can consider. That is for members to determine.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Cruz, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just on the barbecue thing, I support the overall message. I think most members do. I have signed the petition, so I think it's something for us to consider and potentially put on the agenda for next week. So I definitely support that. And then just more specifically, linking it back to my ward, but a general issue that I think a lot of members are facing. So at the last emergency meeting, we were in the early stages of managing a very large influx of visitors to our district. I know we all experienced that. It's generally accepted as referenced by Councillor Purdy in his response to the public question that was asked, that this uncontrolled influx is linked to the relaxation of the lockdown when the Prime Minister published the COVID recovery plan on the 11th of May. In this recovery plan, the guidance advised that people can travel to outdoor spaces irrespective of distance, so long as they respect social distancing. And I'll just re-echo that point, so long as they respect social distancing. My own ward continues to have a large influx of visitors, and there are social distancing issues in my own ward. And I believe other wards also continue to have these issues. I've had reports from Matlock Bath, Bakewell and others. So my question is really to Councillor Purdy. Does the leader believe that the social distancing is actually in place within the Derbyshire Dales, particularly in the hotspots? Is he worried about a second wave? Because I am. And is it time for the UK government to revisit its guidance? Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
We're all concerned about the second wave. We are having to work with the government guidance. Mr. Wilson has been in constant touch with the Divisional Commander of Police. The police answer is that they've got no specific powers to deal with social distancing except to advise. So as far as a second wave and or pressure on government, that pressure is being put on, and I don't think there's anything much I can do as leader to any more than put the pressure on and liaise with the appropriate ministers, which I do on the weekly DCN conference and the East Midlands Council conference the other day, and through our MP. So we are doing what we can, Councillor Cruz, and as best we can in the circumstances. Councillor Raw, you want to come back?
Yes, please. Just come back to the traveller issue, really. I don't feel Paul answered me quite sufficiently. I need clarity on where we move those travellers onto. Those are people with children, with elderly people. We've got concerns from residents in Rowsley that have been expressed through another council member. I want to know what the plans were to move their travelling communities on, where they've gone, and what plans have we in place to find a permanent site, what's the progress on that? Because we obviously have a legal responsibility. It's not just about moving the problem. These people aren't problems, they're part of our community and they've got a legal right to settle somewhere. Thank you.
Apologies to Councillor Rocha, I did omit to answer that question. I'm sorry about that. In terms of the traveller situation, we clearly have one family in the Derbyshire Dales who we owe a homelessness duty to, and that is the family which we've been seeking to accommodate. In accordance with previous council decision, there is a tolerated site in the Derbyshire Dales, and that is the site at Roseley, albeit that site is not currently being used at this present time. So the proposal would be that the travellers would be encouraged to move to the tolerated site. However, over the last week or two, we have seen an increase in travellers passing through the Derbyshire Dales who we don't owe any homelessness duty to. And those travellers do tend to become itinerant and pass through the district and indeed Derbyshire on a fairly regular basis. So we are focusing very much on the needs of one particular family. And in that regard, the search for a permanent site continues. And once we are in a position to bring that back to members, we will do so. But if I could bring in perhaps Tim Braun, if he's got anything further to say, because he's been dealing with this matter direct.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes, very much to echo what Paul said there, really. We worked very hard with that one particular family, and some councillors will know that they've stayed on the Bakewell site for some considerable time and moved there in November in order to deal with an illness within the family in that vicinity. And they were tolerated for that period. We did get an order to move them on in March, but the judge specified very clearly that we shouldn't use that order whilst lockdown measures were in place. The issue that we've got there, though, is that small family encampment, which was largely being coexisting with the Bakewell settled community, has been joined by a much larger group of people, travellers who are not connected with them. And that's the issue we've got to deal with, and that's really what triggered our approach to the court. I should say I did join the Bakewell Town Council virtual meeting on Monday night, and they're fully appraised of the situation, and it's a very good meeting. I thought actually they ran the meeting very well. So we're talking to them as well. We're talking to the Agricultural Horticultural Society, and we're talking to the police. And when we get a court date, we'll let members know what that is.
Thank you, Tim. I've got Councillor Ball next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of issues. Obviously, we've had this extra bit of the waste and people not taking it home, but a lot of our town centre waste bins over the weekend were quite rampacked full with obviously takeaway used packaging from some of the shops, and I do find in some aspects that they're managing to. The fish and chip shop, for one, in the marketplace, I will mention them, seem to be managing to use our bins, and they don't seem to have their own waste bins as regards for their own business to be, making a process of clearing away what rubbish is made. Admittedly, it's down to the responsibility, and people should be taking it away and home. But if it is being near their premises, then I would have thought it would be better if they provided some form, and not just the fish and chip shops, but we've got pizzas and the likes. And the other issue I'd just like to make a point on, we're all sad to say that people are still converging on our beautiful countryside, which, yeah, we've just got to put up with it. But we haven't got to put up with the fact that they are littering and they are excrementing everywhere. It is a legal offence, and the police should be able to step into that, not step into social distancing, that's there for advising, but this issue about doing things in the street, it's a public disorder, and that is something that the police can do, and I do still feel that that's what the police should be doing in these circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to come back on anything there?
Well, just to express the same dissatisfaction that Councillor Mrs Bull has, really. We are seeing increasingly that some traders in all of our town centres, not just Ashbourne, are actually starting to deposit waste in our refuse bins. Clearly, they should have their own trade waste arrangements in place and use them. We do have limited littering patrols in the town centres at the moment. We're trying to visit every town centre on a daily basis, but clearly it's less than we would do normally. So we do require some cooperation, and if traders are interested in keeping their towns clean and tidy, which I hope they are, then hopefully they can help us in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson, please.
Just a couple of things finally on a positive note. I would like to thank Jim, particularly this weekend, for coordinating sort of various complaints we'd had about Bakewell, which seemed to get through and information back and forth to members, which were then passed to the members of the public, who seemed very happy with the response from the council. Secondly, regarding the barbecues, my feeling is that you're better acting as part of a group going forward. Writing our own letters individually just makes more work for our council officers. And I know that the Peak Park Authority, the joint approach was to write to all the leading supermarkets as well as individual shops.
Thank you. Councillor Gamble, you want to come back?
Yeah, I'm just somewhat surprised by the chair's response to Paul Cruise's request and questions, in so much as he seems to think that he can't do anything, and yet it's his party giving this messaging out. Is he not able to communicate with his own party and say, could you actually change the messaging, and that your messaging has been very detrimental to this area? It has caused people to think that the countryside is somewhere to go where you escape coronavirus and do what you like. I mean, he presumably has direct channels to people like Robert Jenrick, who is the local communities and local government officer. Has he done that?
If you rerun the YouTube video, Councillor Gamble, you will hear exactly what I said. And I repeat, I have got direct communications and have had every week when the DCN conference, on the MHLGC conferences, direct line to Rishi Sunak today to ask questions on the discretionary grants, and of course direct line and pressure on our own MP. So I'm doing that. What I'm saying is I can only put the pressure on, and I will do that and will continue to do that. Councillor Raw, please.
Will Gary not agree with me that this is probably a result of Dominic Cummings and him flouting the guidelines, and people just thinking that they can do what they like now? It doesn't really matter. I think it is a concern. And I just wanted to come back to ask Paul if tomorrow when he's on Radio Derby, if he can make a specific plea about barbecues on behalf of the wildlife in our area. It'd be very, very much appreciated by myself, and I'm sure Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and the Peak Park. Thank you.
In answer to the question, Councillor Raw, I will give you the example of Matlock Bath in the very first weekend of lockdown. It was rammed. So I don't think any one individual has caused this. I think there's been a collective lack of responsibility by society. We've seen it in all parts of the country. There was Tombstone in Dorset and there was injuries, and yet people went back. You've heard the messages about the litter. We've had unprecedented amounts of litter drop by seemingly a public with less concern for the areas that they visit than we have. And we're trying to get that message across. Please respect our areas. Councillor Cruz, do you want to come in?
Perhaps, Chair, if I could just come back on Councillor Raw's point before Councillor Cruz. More than happy to put that message across, Councillor Raw. I think it's a very powerful message. We do need to communicate. I am aware that there are 12 businesses already that have said that they won't sell barbecues, but clearly we do need to push that message more. So I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Cruz.
Yeah, really, it's a straight back point from me, because I've listened carefully to what's been said. I guess from my perspective, the lockdown was really well adhered to across most of the country, if not all of the country, both in the inner city areas and in the rural areas. Our own area had a high level of compliance to the lockdown. And then on the 11th of May, when that document was published and the communication that was associated with it, there was a definite change. So the shadow of the leader, the power of the communication that went out, definitely drove a change in behaviour in our society. And I think we just need to reflect on that And all I'm really asking is that as members and as the leader, that we work together to make sure that there's a really clear message going back that the lockdown hasn't been controlled, hasn't been managed well, so the unlock, I should say, and it ought to have been managed better. And that's all I'm asking on behalf of all of our residents, that we reflect on that. We look at what the guidelines are. And if we do have a second wave, which I think probably a lot of us are worried about, how are we going to react to that? Is it going to be we reach a certain level and then it's run to the countryside and get your barbecues out? Or is it going to be, actually, we need to be smart and learn from other countries and really nail this issue? And I don't think we are nailing it. And I think we do have a voice as a collective group that we can go back and say, we need guidelines that are going to protect our district. We want to welcome people when the time is right. The time wasn't right. And I still think we're carrying a lot of risk. And that's the message that I want to put down on record. And I really want support across the whole group, all members, to push that message back. Not party political at all. It's just to protect our residents. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cruz. Well, you know, we've had a conversation today, so hopefully we will get some positive end to that. I've got no more members wishing to speak, no more questions. So I'm going to thank officers and thank everybody for attending. And I think that's it, Sandra, is it? I've got nothing else, nothing missed.
No, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. So thank you for bearing with me tonight. I've got a massive headache, so I don't want any sympathy, thank you, but there we go. So thank you very much. And as they say, good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.